All right. Well, welcome to Conquering the Concrete Ceiling, where women of color face a different type of hurdle. So let's get this kicked off. I want to make sure that we introduce our amazing CEO, Julene Allen from Women of Color in the Workplace. Take us away, Julene.
Hi, everyone. I am Julene Allen, CEO of Women of Color in the Workplace. Welcome to tonight's discussion on the pay gap impacting Asian American Pacific Islander women. Tonight's equal pay discussion is part of a five-part series this year to create awareness about the pay gap impacting women of color. Asian American Pacific Islander women make just 87 cents in comparison to the dollar a non-Hispanic white male makes. And even though it may appear on the surface that Asian American Pacific Islander women may have the slimmest pay gap than any other group of women, they suffer from a type of discrimination and racism that is unbeknown to any other group of women. Secondly, not all Asian American women suffer from a 13-cent pay gap. Some groups of Asian American Pacific Islander women suffer from the worst pay gap than any other group of women of color. Our discussion will touch on a few of those barriers. I'm going to turn the discussion back over to Mabel and Plessic, and also joining this evening is Jay Palaki. So some fun facts about Maybelline. Maybelline is a distinguished engineer for Presidio and manages a team of 7 collaboration engineers. She's also the Chief Diversity Officer of Women of Color in the Workplace. Maybelline is a technology disruptor who encourages others to innovate and help improve business processes that result in positive impact. Maybelline is also a U.S. Army Reserve veteran. She is currently working on her black belt for karate. She named her 4 boys after archangels. Most people ask Maybelline if she gets any sleep since she does so much every day. She loves to read and delves into art and music. She's a tinkerer by heart. And in her spare time, she creates podcasts for her show Vietnamese and hopes to publish her first fiction book this year. Jay Palaki is the founder of HR Geckos, an HR technology and management company. Jay is also the founder and CEO of Career Acers, a professional career counseling and coaching firm that focuses on genuine questions with real impact. Career Acers will help you craft and ace your career success story. Having spent the last 2 decades in several leadership positions across industries, she has impacted how some of the most HR functions are defined and executed. Important HR functions, that is. While Jay handles clients internationally across all HR Geckos markets, she lives, writes, grows tomatoes, solves crosswords, and integrates work into life in the DC metro area. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for that awesome introduction. As you can see, it's a very colorful background of diverse people. And for anyone that's familiar with all of us, we do a lot. We cross function and do everything in the earth as much as 24 hours. So it's not uncommon for us to be called time travelers and time crunchers, acers, and very much change makers. So welcome to the team. Thank you for joining us. So let's talk about a little bit about our background. Why are we even here, right? So let's discuss that. Women of Color in the Workplace is an educational program that provides research and resources to help formulate a bridge between the ambition of women of color professionals and opportunities for advancement. The women of color stress a deeper desire to advance than their counterparts. The research proves that they do not have the same access to those opportunities. Women of Color in the Workplace equips women of color with tools to advance at work because the experience of women of color is unique and intersectional. Also, we provide resources for communities and workplaces to further their diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. And as you already know, especially for the last year's event and current events, DEI is definitely a common topic, and we need to be able to arm all organizations, whether it's corporate, different business functions, especially HR, and all the women employee resources out there. So we want to make sure that we are a resource to all organizations and all groups in diverse environments.
Maybelline, I just wanted to say hello, everyone. And I wanted to make sure you're able to see the screen that Maybelline is sharing, because I am not able to see her screen. So I just wanted to make sure everyone else is.
If you want to.
No, I don't see anything either.
No,
Okay.
you don't see it? Okay.
Thank you.
No.
Good
Nothing
thing you
here
said
either.
it. Let me share it.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Good. How about now? Still nothing? Okay.
Nope.
God. All right. So let me just share my desktop. I was trying to avoid that. Here we go.
Yes.
Now you see it?
Yep.
Okay.
Looks good.
Thanks, Maria. Thanks, Jay. You should have said something sooner.
Well, I thought you might notice in the chat that people were posting about it, so I didn't want to interrupt, but
No.
yeah. Okay.
We're
All
good
right.
now. Okay. Sounds good. All right. So moving right along. Let's get to the next slide. About this program. All right. So women of color in the workplace is already, it's facing a lot of different things, right? One of them is discussing what the barriers are. It is already a very challenging environment, especially on top of COVID-19 and all the natural disasters that are occurring. So we want to make sure that on top of the things that we're dealing with today, that we explain that. So it hasn't changed, unfortunately. There's not a lot of movement, a large significant movement defining what it is that we're facing. We want to make sure you understand the different ceilings, and one of that is a glass ceiling. For women of color, that's not necessarily pertinent. For women of color, we call it a concrete, because we do have a lot more barriers that we're facing intersectionally in different levels. So we want to make sure that that definition is distinguished and you have an understanding of what we're combating. It's not a simple solution. There's a lot of layers that we need to understand, and we want to make sure that we arm you with resources, including mentors and potential sponsors in the future, and know how to conversate on the topic. It's not an easy conversation. It's very challenging, and want to make sure that we give you ways to be brave and be able to voice your opinions safely and without retaliation. So that's one of the reasons why we have this program. If you do have questions, please add it on the chat. And thankfully, Jay is tracking that. Can't do all that at once. So Jay, call it out. Anybody else, if I'm not moving a slide or anything else. So we do have 2 asks for all of you that joined us. Commit to share and openly and honestly, and make sure that you are listening with empathy. We are not machines. We're not perfect. We want to encourage sharing of experiences in your stories. This is not going to be meaningful unless you can take action right after the event. This is not just a slide. We want to make sure that as soon as you finish this discussion, that you can arm yourself and you can get the tools and support that you need to move forward. The second ask is commit to investing and be present. So I know that many of us come back to back from many meetings, right? It can be overwhelming, but this is for you that we're creating this material. So please stay as present as possible. We understand there are different commitments. So we'll try to not waste your time and get you to the main content of this event. And we mentioned it already. If you're concerned about camera, you can turn it off. We really do want to encourage, a personal story here. So if you're comfortable, please share your camera. Later on, we'll definitely have even more active discussions to promote it. So just want to make sure that that's something that you knew. Here's an important quote that we want to make sure we speak about. The only thing that separates women of color from everyone else is opportunity, by Viola Davis. And many of us can certainly relate to this. You can have all the tools, but if you don't have the opportunities or somebody opening the door for you, it's a very challenging situation or experience that you will have, whether it's professionally or even personally. So this definitely hits us directly. And I want to make sure that we have embodied the message clearly as best as we can to relate to you. Quick overview of the entire event. We do have a 5 to 10 minutes icebreaker, so we'll have that later on. Most of the presentation will cover about 60 minutes with some discussion. So there will be some questions that we prompt you to respond. So hopefully you will be actively answering some of those. after the presentation is covered, we have the action. That's also 5 to 10 minutes. And finally, in the end, we do a wrap up as well as announcements in the end. So that is the entire overview. Here's the icebreaker. Who knows the difference between race and racism? So this is definitely an open ask. So please unmute yourself. You can announce yourself where you're from and share what your answer is for this.
Hey, this is Maria. Racism is a fear of race, and race is the human race. Am I close?
Yes. Awesome. There you go, Maria. Anyone else want to add to that? Okay. Well, you got it right on the mark, Maria. So racism is a byproduct of race, which is a social construction. Despite often being misguidedly defined by skin tone and other physical attributes, race has no genetic basis. We could not echo that enough. Because biologically, at the core, there is no difference between one human being to another, aside from the fact that we have a different sexual organ and can be described differently physically. So let's just summarize that, right? Commonly defined as prejudice plus power. Racism is prejudice or discrimination against someone based on his or her race. Underlying this is the belief that certain racial groups are superior to others. So we definitely don't want to promote that. We want to open the conversation. So that summarizes right there. Anything else? Anybody else want to add to that? No.
So I just wanted to ask if you're clear about the correlation between race and racism. Because often these two terms are used interchangeably, and there is some confusion. I know some folks who use race and racism interchangeably.
Right. And don't be shy.
So Dr. Cecilia Brantley says race is biologically inherited and racism is developed later in life. Absolutely.
Yes, I agreed on that.
Spot on.
Yeah, it's a learned behavior, right? So like you've heard that quote statement before, we weren't born with racism. It's a behavior that we pick up due to our upbringing and how we interact with the world, right? So it's a learned behavior.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
All right,
Dr. Cecilia. All right. So let me move on to the next slide. All right. So let's talk about this slide right here. Barriers and biases. Who is the better nurse? That's a question for the audience. Can you tell based on this picture? Not really, right? So what if I told you they are both terrific nurses and they have won national nurse awards in before and they are passionate? So it really doesn't have a difference. The main thing is just distinguishing it. We deal with biases on gender, right? And even skin, but there is no difference. We are performance based in general, but we don't get recognized by that. But it is a lens that affects many of us, especially if we're the ones being discriminated on. So that is the main point of this slide, is to point out that there really isn't a difference. It's a perception, right? It's a bias that we encounter day to day.
Pauline says, no, can't tell, need more information. Right. Definitely can't tell.
Yes, no, definitely can't tell based on this. Great answer, Pauline. Anybody else? Okay. So one thing that we want to note too is different labels on, occupation, right? So you've heard it before, possibly. Many in the field of nurse, typically it's not uncommon where a lot of Filipinos are known to be nurses or caregivers, right? So based on your ethnicity, they correlate your function or role in different businesses. Same thing even for farming or even doing the grass services that you have, right? It's not the first time it's been referenced that depending on ethnicity, they assume that that's the kind of role that you have. And for Asians specifically, They typically think we're very good at math, right? Or we're typically scientists or somebody in the engineering field. So there are definitely preconceptions on ethnicity, and those are some of the barriers and biases that we want to make sure that we enlighten others on. So we'll move on to the next. All right, intersectionality. Why should we care about intersectionality? Intersectionality is about recognizing all identities from gender, identity, race, sexuality, ability, class, education, geography, language, religion, nationality, body size, and type. The list can definitely go on. Take note of that, right? So it's important to distinguish that keyword. If anything, I'm going to ask, how many are familiar with intersectionality? It looks like Dr. Cecilia mentioned the only difference is what you see. That is gender and nationality. So yes. But how many can actually explain what intersectionality means and what that means to you and how it affects you? Anyone add to that question? No? Okay, we'll try to explain that further. This term was actually coined by a legal scholar, Kimberly Crenshaw, in 1989. It addresses the idea that specific groups experience discrimination, bias, and exclusion far greater based upon their combined social classifications. And I know we mentioned that repeatedly earlier. And we can give you examples of intersectionality, right? So adopting an intersectional framework is not an easy process. It involves seeking to understand things that are difficult for you to understand. It could be layers of things. So, for example, oftentimes it may be doubled, tripled, or quadrupled or more. We have a person of color, female, with low income, with a disability facing these multiple barriers. So, this does occur. And now, for example, it also happens to be another one, a white, gay, disabled male can experience bias and barriers getting ahead. Therefore, he is also experiencing intersectionality. So, based on that explanation, does that make sense to the audience? Can you relate to that? Do you have experiences of intersectionality based on that definition?
Yes, I have.
You have? So, go ahead and share.
So, so being raised in Italy and in the United States, actually in both countries, I worked overseas in Italy, and when I said that I was from America, they assumed I was from South America based on the way I look. And when I spoke English in Italy, they said to me, your English is really good. Well, it happens to be my mother tongue, but they didn't know that. They were making judgments based on my appearance. And then in the reverse also, growing up Italian American in the United States, there were, preconceived ideas of, like mafia and all those kind of things.
I was just watching Friends and Romans on Prime last night, and that speaks to that Italian American mafia stereotypes. So in a very comic way, but you're so right. You see an Italian American, you start talking like Marlon Brando, the Godfather, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's like that's, when I was living here in the United States, that was the thing, and especially growing up. And then even regionally within Italy, from one region to another, for example, my family came from Sicily. My father immigrated to the United States for a better life. His brothers went to northern Italy to a city called Torino. When I was working in Rome, I would fly to the UK for work. And I had been sitting on the plane in a first class seat. And a very nice gentleman, very distinguished, older, probably in his 70s, was traveling to the UK also. And he was just chit-chatting, talking about how Southern Italians really don't like to work. They pretend they have broken arms, broken legs so that they can, get the pension, the Social Security, etc. And then he looked at me and said, wow, you speak really good Italian. Where did your parents come from? And after like his 20-minute thesis on what's wrong with Southern Italy, I said, well, my father came from Sicily and my mother was from Abruzzo. And his smile went into a frown and he said to me, well, there's a lot of nice people that come from there too. And that, I have to say, was really my biggest shot of what racism feels like in my own country, in Italy. It was really a stunner, I have to say.
That is, yeah, it's definitely uncomfortable, right? And I would say even not even just just the racial piece, even between cross interracial couples, right?
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. My husband's Croatian. I'm Filipino Pacific Islander. They confuse me as the babysitter of my children. I'm pushing my kid along with the cart,
Oh my
and an
gosh.
actual woman was hitting on my husband while we were looking for an apartment. And another instance that I had, I was getting introduced to this karate school, and they had like a demonstration, right? So I'm watching my kids turn, quick karate, just seeing how things are. They had like an open house, and the teacher goes, "So, are you a relative of your kids?" I'm like, "No, I'm their mom."
I bet their smile turned into a frown too.
Yes, they did. And then I
What a
had another.
shocker.
Yeah, and even the last name, right? So as you can see, you read Mabel and Plesic, right? But it's really pronounced Plecic. It's Croatian in the end. A lot of itch, maklab, all that. I used to work for another larger company, and I met the CEO who was placing training phones for Cisco phones. And the first thing he did was look me up on AD, right? He saw my name, never saw my picture, but as soon as I walked in, he's like, "Oh, I thought you were not Philippine," basically. He didn't say it, right? But he was confused because she was thinking I was a Caucasian woman, right? And I walked in and I'm definitely not Caucasian. So he's like, "Oh," he had to pause. So yes, I've definitely experienced odd conversations before. I've had to prove it over and over again. So it's an interesting conversation. How many of you have experienced that where they thought you were something else, especially if you're an interracial couple?
Well, my last name is Polaki. I am Indian American. And a lot of people think I'm Polish. So when I was in Illinois, I was mistaken for a Polish male because J is usually a male's name, apparently. And I've been mistaken. I walked into meetings and conferences. I've been mistaken to just be someone there to take care of the catering order or something, but not Jay Polaki. When I introduce myself, you should see people's faces sometimes.
Oh,
But that was at the beginning of my career here in the United States. So it was a funny experience to, be part of.
well,
But
even the language that you speak, right? So they don't think I can speak Tagalog or I can speak Spanish. So it's not the first. I used to work in a cleaning room before for Baxter, and they thought I could not understand Spanish or Tagalog, right? And the whole time they were speaking, gossiping, and I'm like, "You just don't know. I can understand everything you're saying, but you just didn't realize I could speak your language, and sometimes better than some people." So there's a misconception of what language or native language you have if you're multi-language. So it looks like we have a few that can relate.
yeah.
Dr. Cecilia is rocking it here. I would love to hear her speak because you're speaking, sending text, chat messages, and it looks like Joy, same thing, been mistaken as the daughter's nanny, and she's mixed Filipino Caucasian. Yes, we know that story. Or they always think potluck, and they assume I can cook Filipino food. I don't. So they always ask me, "Can you make me that Filipino, pancit or the egg rolls or whatever?" I'm like, "No, I go to a Vietnamese restaurant. They make me the food. I ask my aunt to make leche flan. I don't make the food." So, and it looks like Rachel also has experienced the same. Um, if you're willing to share verbally and unmute yourself, go ahead and share. Otherwise, I'm going to move on to the next slide, which we have plenty. And feel free to add and interject as well if you have questions. We don't want to make it one way. We want to encourage you to discuss with us. All right. So this is why it's so important to know what intersectionality is. You've seen this before, right? We have chains, basically invisible on us. And you're still seeing my screen, right, Jay? I just want to make sure.
Yes, yes, your screen
Okay.
is visible. Yep.
Right. So on the left, we can easily relate that the environment is already set up for success for mostly male and Caucasian, right? And on the right side, if you have layers of one, your gender, your skin tone, your accent, the last name, the perceived, or even your height. It's not the first time that I've been told, hey, I thought you were 6 feet tall, but I'm only 5'1". I don't know how they can get height from just speaking, but it's not. They've also assumed that because I have a presence in my meeting that I'm 6 foot tall when they see me. So I very much disappoint them when they see me face to face. So this topic is that close to us. We have entertaining, embarrassing moments, and we want to make sure that you know that you're not alone. So we definitely love the stories. We want you to share it and encourage it so that you know you're not the only one that's experiencing this. And another interesting story that we have is an experience that Julene had also from her own experience. So I'll share that story. It's a peculiar one. She had a couple years ago for Lean In Women of Color during a roundtable discussion with Procter and Gamble. She had no idea that she would walk away with so many unique stories, just like we're talking about now. An example that she had, a woman who was of Asian descent explained how she did not speak up in meetings because she had an accent. She felt that people would feel she lacked competence. An African American woman was able to relate to this because it took her years to get rid of her Southern accent. She felt her deep Southern accent hindered her professionally. So, again and again, we keep hearing this, right? The group started discussing the stigmas tied to different types of accents, yet they also pointed out that some accents have an advantage. We already know this. They assess that someone who speaks with a European accent may have access to certain opportunities because some cultures are often romanticized. So let's go to the next questions, Jay. That's right after that.
Yep. So that's an interesting story that Julene brought to the fore. My question is to the audience: why do you think there is an intelligence factor tied to different accents? Remember, we've always talked about Southern accents or Hispanic, Latino women with an accent who've been stereotyped differently than European women with an accent. I've known folks who spoke, who were from Spain and then who were from South America, and they were viewed differently. And definitely one accent is romanticized over the other. I think it's more unconscious bias, not overtly
Mm-hmm.
intended, but it's just unconscious bias.
Oh yeah, and even that, from Spain, right? They do speak Spanish. There's
Yeah,
different types of Spanish,
yeah.
and we all are familiar with different accents between North, South, East region, and they distinguish it as part of a social class. They'll say, "Oh, you more
Mhm.
less able to support yourself," assuming an accent. It looks like Brit share that retweet on the Southern accent. And that has been coming up. There have been videos even on YouTube, in Facebook, they've been sharing. Why does it matter that I have a Southern accent? They could be scientists and engineers. That has nothing to do with how intelligent and how well they perform, right?
Mhm. Absolutely.
So
And while intersectionality calls attention to our unique experiences, I think it also asks us to be more receptive and open to listening to and being more compassionate about these differences, right? Like, be more of a listener, a student, and an ally. And that's why keeping that intersectionality in mind for all of us, even though we are from different demographics, I think we all experience this, and we also have to make that a part of our DNA so we are not perpetuating it to another group. So it's so important to
yeah.
keep that in mind.
Yes, definitely the key word right there. I think awareness is one of them, and that's why many of you have joined. So, how to identify those experiences? What is intersectionality, right? What are the certain words? What are some of our blinders? Because we're not perfect. We all have biases ourselves, and depending if it's a good or bad experience, we attach those experiences to good or bad, and that's, I think, how we end up being judgmental is because of that, right?
Yes.
So we'll move on to the next slide. So additional biases common for women of color. Plenty of you can definitely relate to that. And yes, Dr. Cecilia, we automatically pin a label on the person speaking and file them away in a social status or category. Yes, that's exactly right. 100%. And this could be something that is familiar to many of you or some of you. How many are in a STEM or familiar with a STEM program or in this type of category? So that means science, tech, engineering, and math field. So how many of you from the audience are in STEM? I know at least one. She hasn't said it. Maria is in there because she's one of my women employee resource group members.
Anne says she is.
And she said, okay. Anyone else? So even if you're not an engineer, if you're in the field of technology, you're definitely aware of the situation. Looks like Anne, Loretta.
Kel, I think Kel raised her hand, so she says she is.
Okay, Chrissy.
Maria.
Kel, yeah. Quite a few, which is great. Engineer by schooling, but in sales of work. Welcome, Michelle. We need both sides, believe you me. All right. So we asked that, and based on the National Center for Education Statistics reports, that is in the 2015 report, the percentage of women of color attending higher education institutions who earn STEM degrees were 5% Asian, 2.9% Black women, and 3.8% Latinas. All right, so because women, and particularly women of color, have been historically underrepresented in STEM majors at universities as well as in STEM careers, many women in the field feel that they work in biased environments. Scientific American discovered that 45% of women in STEM leave their jobs because of feeling underpaid and underrepresented. All right, so how many can relate to that? I'm thinking majority of us are underpaid, right? Overqualified and not recognized. So I think there's a common theme there. And I think in general, we just need to share more and be more transparent. So this way we can support each other. And Brit's clapping. I see that. Maria, yes. So recognizing it, calling each other and helping out, elevate each other. We don't want to anymore the queen bee factor. So elevate yourself. I know some of us have experienced very bitter experiences and we didn't have the support systems in the past, but I think today is a new day. You are in here, you're not alone. It's not just women. We have women, other allies, men, and also other backgrounds that will continue to support and enable you. So we'll talk about some of those biases. One of them is prove it again. As engineers, we know this. We're already over certified and very qualified, but for whatever reason, we are perceived to not be the SME or the expert in conversations. Some of us have been quieted or asked to re-verify and prove it again, while men already are assumed expert in the field of whatever they're speaking of. And it's not just engineering, really anything. And Dr. Cecilia, she shared a research and online source that we can reference, so we'll definitely save that when we get the chance. It is male dominated, agreed on that. Many of us can say that, especially me, I'm in the engineering field, it is very rare to have more than one or two women in the meeting. So I'm actually trying to change that together. Maria, thankfully, is part of our team and committee. We're trying to get more women in one meeting, more than just one, and not the only one. That's a common tendency. The other piece is the tightrope. We have double bind and likability bias. Common thing is, not having the positive perception just because we're women. It's a combination. If we're too assertive, we're called angry. Bad perceptions here for Latinas, they're too saucy or spicy. Asian women, if we are assertive or aggressive, we're contradicting being submissive or docile, right? So even for me, I break all those barriers. I'm too vocal for being an Asian woman, much less Filipina. So many of my friends, if not coworkers, know I'm going to be the one that asks a million questions, and I do that as much as possible to open up more opportunities for others that are not as vocal to speak up. And I usually call on people so that they can have the space to speak. So I try to do that, and I would ask that you do the same. If you know of individuals that are less comfortable speaking up, invite them. Let them speak up and say and talk about the great successes they have, not just take the glory for ourselves, right? So let's give you some statistics. 1/3 of all women felt this way. However, 40.9% of Asian American women face this than any other group. So for whatever reason, because they're considered this very submissive, having this experience affect them, it's definitely adding to the burden that we have. Additional biases that we have is the maternal wall or maternal bias. When professional women have children, they often find themselves running into a wall. Their commitment and competence are questioned again. Nearly 2/3 of scientists with children reported running into this form of bias across all races and ethnic groups. Another one that we kind of briefly discussed earlier is the tug of war. 3/4 agree that other women are support. At least women are supported, but nonetheless, at least a fifth believe they are competing for the woman's spot in their job. So we've seen it and experienced it before. We feel like we only have one seat to compete for, and maybe there's not even one, right? So how do you try to motivate yourself to promote not only yourself but others, so you don't feel like you want to elevate somebody else? What is it that you're going to gain if you do support another woman? If anything, I will counter it and say, if you do help elevate another woman, you're opening up more seats and more opportunities for more women to actually be represented everywhere. So I would invite you to try to move forward and elevate others regardless, especially women, and give them a helping hand. They're not alone. The other piece that we want to share is the isolation. I know many of us are just trying to survive. We're trying to do a great job at what we do, but we become siloed quite a bit, that we only see a small, narrow window of opportunity, and we're not thinking outside the box. You're not seeing that there are other things that we need work on changing, especially discrimination, right? So try to open up and expand your view. See what your peer or next person in the next department, create those bonds and share your stories. You never know when somebody else is also struggling and you might share the same challenges that you have. So I'm going to ask a question, just a show of hands. Is this information new to you, or have you heard this before? So you can either share in the chat or share it verbally. Is this a surprise to anyone? I see Kim unmuting. Did you want to share, Kim?
Why are you watching me?
Because I want more engagement here. I can't be the only one speaking in this discussion. Come on, Kim.
So I'm not surprised at all, because a lot of those biases, we live them every day. Being another woman in engineering, and as long as I've been in the industry, it really has taken quite a bit for women to get to, I would say, in the same space that I've been in. So most of my career has been around nothing but men. And to be a Black female, it really was very odd for me to be in a data center infrastructure type class. So not a lot of women in a route switch infrastructure space, especially the data center space. And that's kind of the track that I had. So being in rooms and being the only female, very awkward. Being the only Black female was double awkward. So it was definitely something that I'm very familiar with.
Yes. And we could not echo it enough. And it looks like Chrissy also, not surprised. Dr. Cecilia, great points. Helping other women creates genuine sisterhood. That's really what we need. And all the things that you've experienced is very much relatable. And it's 2021 and we're still fighting for this, right? That's the sad truth. You'll see later on the next slide why I'm saying sad truth. I'll move on to the next. Anybody else want to share? Thank you, Kim. All
You're
right.
welcome.
Awesome. So microaggressions, near and dear to heart to quite a few of us, sadly. Let's talk about that. And Jay, you have a question for our audience.
Yes. So, audience, can someone tell me what microaggressions are, or what you think of microaggressions when you hear the term microaggressions? Anyone? So, microaggressions have basically been defined as the everyday verbal, non-verbal, and environmental slights, snubs, or insults, whether intentional or unintentional, which communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative messages to target persons based solely upon their marginalized group membership. And I think, Maybelline, you got this definition off of one of your scientific research studies. It's very complex and detailed.
Yes.
Lenitra Webb says unconscious bias made real is a microaggression. Yes. Britt says low-key oppression. Yes, definitely low-key oppression. So some examples that we probably have come across, and I definitely have come across a lot of these. Your English is good.
Mm-hmm.
You are so articulate. What she is trying to say is, so someone trying to explain or re-explain what you just said, you are not like other, and you can insert any race, ethnicity there, people. What are you ladies gossiping about? Do you have relatives that are still in Mexico? I get that a lot. I'm like, where are you from? Where
Yeah.
are you? And when I say I'm from Maryland, I'm asked, where are you originally from?
Yes.
Sometimes it's a harmless question just because they want to know. But sometimes, and I have been in meetings in C-suites where they have asked a specific question to make sure I know my place in the hierarchy of things.
Yes. Very subtle.
Yeah.
And you're right. Actually, that's one of my least favorite questions that I hear is, no, where are you really from? So they even raise the pitch a little bit and ask it and try to make it as a question mark, right? And some of them you can tell the tone, right? They're innocent. They're not that affecting. But
Yes.
some are very direct. And I typically just said, no, I'm really from Illinois. That's where I grew up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not even born in the Philippines. If somebody really asks, I'm actually born in Papua New Guinea. My brother's born in Lesotho, South Africa. So to me, when they ask me that question, I'd rather them be specific. Where were you born? Instead of saying where you're from, I would rather have them ask, where were you born instead? And that's an easier opening for me to say, yeah, I was born in a different country.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So there are ways to ask it, but it is something that we need to enlighten others to discuss. So,
And Dr. Brantley says, per definition, unintentional discrimination against members of a marginalized group, such as a racial or ethnic minority. Yep.
right on the definition. Next time, we're going to have Dr. Cecilia as one of our panelist speakers here.
Yes, she should be on the panel. I'm not sure why she's not unmuting herself. All right. So microaggressions also can be categorized by three major types. The first type are micro assaults, and they're usually intentional and conscious. Everyday racism manifested in a systemic or environmental manner. For instance, when a person is refused service, referred by a racial slur, or assaulted for being a person of color. So that's micro assaults. And the second form of microaggression is a micro insult. They are usually well intended, sometimes passed off as a compliment, like telling a person they speak so well, or asking an Asian person if they can tutor someone else in math. And micro insults can be verbal or non-verbal and demeaning to a person's heritage or identity. And third type of microaggression is micro invalidation, a term coined by Dr. Wing Su, a psychology professor at Columbia University. So these are often unconscious and well-intended and consist of nullifying the bias experiences of another person and leaving the individual feeling as though she or he is a foreigner in their own country. For instance, when a person says they do not see race, or asking someone to teach someone else words from their native language. And so that's micro invalidation. So has anyone experienced any of these microaggressions?
And feel free to just type it away if you want.
And you know, these microaggressions are usually used to single you out as opposed to making you feel like you're part of a group, right? So they're trying to make you aware of your difference more than your more than your uniqueness, but they're trying to make sure that you're being singled out. And the most detrimental forms of microaggressions are usually delivered by well-intentioned individuals who are unaware that they have engaged in harmful conduct toward a socially devalued group. And these everyday occurrences may on the surface appear quite harmless, trivial, or be described as small slights, but research indicates they have a powerful impact upon the psychological well-being of marginalized groups and affect their standard of living by creating inequities in healthcare, education, and employment. So that's a lot to unpack right there in that sentence. And definitely, you know, there are lots of inequities because of how, you know, these small slights impact the self-esteem of individuals, right? And that has the snowball effect into other areas of their life and personality and career, and has a detrimental effect on a lot of things. So, Maybelline, I believe you have a question here for our audience.
Right, let me go back. Yes. So, what can be a good way to respond to a microaggression? Does anybody have a recommendation on how to interact when you're experiencing it? That's a tricky one, too.
Dr. Brantley says, I'm learning wonderful new terminology. We all are. I never knew about these different types of microaggressions till I, you know, actually started talking about them. That they had a term for these. I just call them microaggressions, but apparently they have specific terms for the types of microaggressions.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, a good way to respond to a microaggression, if you identify it as a microaggression in that moment, if you are present, you know, I would say not only present but brave enough to address it and take it head on. I've you know, seen folks where, you know, they're very friendly, but they engage in this. Sometimes it's a slight, definitely, but they say it in a very nice way. I just call it out. I've just said, well, that's not me. Or, you know, if it's a stereotype that they're perpetuating, I say that's a stereotype. Even though, you know, I belong to this particular demographic, I don't do any of that stuff. And neither does anyone in my circle. So that definitely is a stereotype, or things like that. I've done that in the past, and it definitely has worked. I don't know if it changed their behavior, but in that moment, I did not feel slighted. I thought that I, you know, kind of spoke my mind and
Mm-hmm.
explained what their perception was back to them.
Right. And it looks like we have a few great answers here, too. So, Dr. Cecilia, use a sense of humor to demonstrate they did not break your confidence. I definitely wholeheartedly believe in humor. I think that's how I've made it through my work. It's a male dominated field. And if I did not learn comedy, or at least knowing bloopers and not feeling too embarrassed and embarrassing myself tactfully or falling graciously, is a great concept to do and learn. It's not easy to learn to do that, because for a long time I took things literally myself, coming from different countries and even accents. Sometimes the straight face joke or cynicism that people had took me some time. It went over my head literally for years. That's how long straight, you know, talk was. Um, it looks like
Absolutely.
Lori had a good one. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. What do you mean? That is, yeah, Laurie says, what do you mean? Just ask that. What do you mean by that? And then Maria says, I usually answer their question politely and hope they figure it out or try to correct them politely. And Dr. Brantley also used an analogy that can hopefully put themselves in your place. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Often, this is one example I've always encountered coming from India. I've often been asked about snake charmers. And snakes are something that I'm terrified of, and actually I'm like really terrified of them. I don't even want to have a conversation with snakes in it, but they would always ask me that, right, when I first came to this country 20 years ago. And I wouldn't know how to answer that question, because living in India, I never thought being a snake charmer was the biggest profession and takeaway from being Indian, right? And I would often be asked that question. In fact, about 5 years ago too, I was asked this question at a community event, which was very odd to me. But I usually try to inform them that there are no snake charmers in India. I mean, even if they are, they're in the very rural areas, and it's not the land of snake charmers. That's what I try to tell them, that we are not just snake charmers. We are so many other things as well, right?
Yes, quite a bit more.
It's a lot more, right? And so it's funny when I hear those questions, and definitely someone says some people watch too much TV. Yeah, Maria, they definitely watch too much TV. Kel B, what part of India are you from? I'm from South India. Yes, I'm from the southeast coast of India, along the Bay of Bengal.
Definitely not. Wow.
So,
Yeah, those are the stories. So yeah, and to add to that, right? Don't be an observer. Be an ally. Allies need to know that sometimes their voices can have a larger impact than those of the people directly affected by microaggressions. When a target of microaggression speaks up, the microaggression may dismiss them as prejudiced, oversensitive, or even hostile and angry. So this is really important that you are an ally to those that are being oppressed, and call it out, like Jay said. Confidently step in your comfort zone, obviously, and safely, as long as it doesn't physically attack or hurt you. Speak for yourself. Do not try to speak for the person who has experienced the microaggression, since doing so can itself be a form of microaggression. Speaking on someone else's behalf can be unintentionally diminishing. As an alternative to saying you offended her, say, here's why I'm offended, right? And ally is an action where you must do something to be one. That's agreed, Kel. I'm sure many of you have seen recordings before where they just record the event and don't help or take action, and we've unfortunately it's caused death, right? With all the cameras and cell phones available, of all things, people just standing by does not help the cause. So if you can possibly, please step in, give people the space, be empathetic, but most of all, you can help now. You don't need to wait a few weeks, have to wait to report to HR or report to some agency. There are things that you could do today to help each other out and slowly improve it. It's a marathon, a never-ending marathon. So any small acts of kindness does help. It's paying it forward, right? So little by little. Plus, it's also good practice for you, right? If you're not confident about doing it, small acts of kindness does amplify. So repeated practice of it becomes an example for the rest, just like grassroots revolution, right? So let's start small, help each other out. So we'll move on to the next one. And I did say there's a sad story. Here's one. Many have said, the page gap, right? And we all can call out to it. And sadly, this is how different it is. Worst of all, in the research report, and I'll read that to you, according to the Institute for Women's Policy Research, women are almost half of the workforce. They are the sole or co-breadwinner in half of American families with children. They receive more college and graduate degrees than men. Let that sink in. We are overqualified. Yet, on average, women continue to earn considerably less than men. In 2019, female full-time year-round workers made only 82 cents for every dollar earned by men, a gender wage gap of 18%. For Asian American women at that time, at 2019, in 2019, it was 90 cents. For Black women, it was 62 cents. For Native women, Native American women, 57 cents. And for Latinas, it was 54 cents. Some of us have heard this news before. And now, if you're looking at the slide, I would question it, right? Because then it just downgrade. It was 90 cents for Asian American women, and now it's 87 cents. It's still 82 cents here, right, for a white woman. But for African American women, it only went up 3 cents. For Native American women, it went up 3 cents. For Hispanic women, it only went up 1 cent. How sad is that? It's 2021. That was a report done in 2019. So how many of you feel that this information is wrong? So that's a question for the audience. What do you think? Is this wrong or right? The data that they're reporting on for the wage gap.
Frankly, I can definitely tell you, I've been in compensation and I've, kind of looked at pay equity across the board when it comes to different professions in an organization. I think a lot of organizations today are very aware of this pay inequity, and they're doing whatever they can to make sure that these gaps do not exist. Because we have laws that can be enforced and can help someone if they do file a complaint with the Equal Employment Commission or with their HR department. And these definitely what you're showing on the screen are I'm thinking better numbers than hopefully in the past, but as you can see, we have a long way to go. I mean, why is there this inequity? We are doing the same job.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and even Lucy added, do they account for education levels?
Yeah, they do. I'm sure they do account for education levels, but at the same time, if we are in the same role, we should all be getting paid the same salary and the same wage, irrespective.
Well,
Go ahead.
They absolutely are counting education level for women. We would not land the job of a white man at all without a number of degrees, for sure. So I definitely believe those numbers are probably fairly accurate. It's sad that it's that way. But we're dealing with gender, race, and class. And America is definitely built on some particular values that the white man is going to always exceed in salary in most cases.
Yep.
With very little. I know PMs, folks that just came, white males that have just come from out of high school, and they are PMs without a PM certification, but they're getting paid like about $150,000. But I know another PM who went to school, a Black female, got her certifications, and she has two undergrad degree or master's degree, and she's making $125,000.
Is it in the same organization, Kim? If I can ask.
No, it's not the same organization.
Okay.
I just want to add that, yes, the data is based on a side-by-side comparison, and it accounts for education levels. So typically, like Kim stated, oftentimes women are, they're more than qualified, right? We know that when we're applying for a particular position that we're going to have more education. We need to have more education than a man, right? And so I just wanted to add that typically when women are entering these roles, they're more than qualified for the position.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And someone else asked whether it was just STEM. This is across the board in all industries.
Yeah, so it's not just particular job function. So
and what was the study that this was based on?
Yeah, it was done by the Institute for Women in Policy Research. So good
Mhm.
question. It is a reputable institution that's been doing this for a while now, over 30 years.
Wow.
So they have this broken down by industry, state, gender, race. They are one of the top think tanks in the United States. They've been asked to testify and to report on this. They've definitely been showcased in the New York Times,
Mhm.
Washington Post, USA Today. So there's definitely a trusted source. They produce widely cited research on the gender wage gap. And again, they've been testifying in Congress to talk about women's economic security, employment opportunities, and retirement income. So, yeah, so the name is the Institute for Women in Policy Research. So that's the agency or organization that reported this statistics.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay.
So there you have it. It's from a reputed think tank, and definitely very recent research from 2019. So it's not old. So it's there in front of us, staring at us, and here we are in 2021 talking about it.
Right.
Still talking about it.
Yes.
So what are some things we can do to eliminate the wage gap, do you guys think? Any ideas?
Entrepreneurship.
Start your own gig?
Yes.
Yep.
Negotiate.
Kel, you unmuted yourself.
Yes, I said negotiate.
Negotiate, yes. Develop negotiation skills, definitely, yes. And I see that a lot more today than I used to see it 15 years ago. A lot more women of color have learned how to negotiate and are negotiating their salaries a lot more.
Yep. And Pauline said, know your worth. Don't be afraid to ask. And if you're going to ask, please go high, not low, because, just like when you're bartering, they may go lower. So I would say ask for the sky at this point, because most likely they're going to go lower than what you want anyway. Don't start with the low ball price.
And
Dr.
if they,
Brantley,
oops,
sorry.
sorry.
Go ahead,
If,
Kim.
if they say no, that's maybe or not right now. So
Yep.
come back in 6 months.
Yep.
Don't stop until you get your yes.
Yes. Exactly.
And Dr. Brantley says, until you get the salary you desire based upon meeting the qualifications, as a health wellness consultant, remember health is equal to wealth. Absolutely.
That's a nice acronym there.
Yeah. And Pauline says, know your worth and don't be afraid to ask for it. Elsa says, advocate for pay equity, audits and pay equity policies. Absolutely. That is the way to go. Laurie says, companies need to make salaries public. Yes. And actually now in 2021, it's so much more needed, right? Especially with what's going on in our society. We know there's inequity. We know that there is racism in our workplaces, in our lives, and it's not something that we can just push under the rug. It's there, and we need to be talking about it, and we need to be asking companies to make their salaries public. I used to work for the government before I started my own gig, and we always published all the salaries of everyone, right? In the newspaper, at least once a year, it used to be published, at least here in Maryland, in the state government, it used to be. And when I worked for private, of course, employers, it was a different story. So definitely, yeah, ask companies to make their salaries public. And Annie Thomas says, in tech, we have designation promotion based on meritocracy, a mixed panel of all genders for promotion recommendations. Definitely, yes. And meritocracy has its, good side and the bad side. It really depends on how they're using that to promote.
Well, accountability.
Yeah. And Dr. Brantley says, I agree, Maybelline, regarding negotiating high to balance the minimum you will accept, definitely. And Elsa says, yes, pay transparency is so key. Absolutely. Wonderful. And so some more things in addition would be to refer to a mentor, a friend, or someone within your industry for advice and support before accepting an offer. So an outside party may be able to lend advice and support and may envision you as a greater asset than you see yourself. And seeking out a mentor or coach or someone you look up to in a high powered position can help you prepare and work through your nerves as well. And also do your homework. So there are ways to find out what the market is paying for the work you're doing, whether it's doing online research or not being afraid to ask around. And also discuss money and pay with friends. Sometimes we shy away from discussing money, but that's what keeps us in the dark. And also do away with imposter syndrome. And this imposter syndrome has been, out there for such a long time, but it's a phenomenon in which people, usually high achieving professionals, don't consider themselves qualified for their position and convince themselves that they've cheated their way into it.
Mm-hmm.
How many of you have done that?
I think all of us have. I can easily raise my hand there.
Exactly. That's why I was raising my hand while asking the question, right? We all engage in that at some point in time or the other. I mean, I grew up in a very confident family with a very, robust parental system in place that made me extremely confident. But when I came to the US and I, had to schlep it out on my own, there was no one here to guide me. Of course, I felt like an imposter at times, and I had to convince myself, no, I'm a highly qualified and high achieving professional, and had to, talk to that inner voice and ask it to go away, right? Yeah. But it takes a lot of strength and a lot of self-esteem to do that, especially when you're being, if someone is trying to slight you or make you feel less of what you are.
Yeah, and let me add to that inner voice, because I constantly deal with that, mentoring others as well. Overthinking, double asking or questioning or second guessing yourself, even when you're taking certification, same thing. You're second guessing every step of the way. And you've heard this before, your own judgment is worse than what others perceive you. So what I've been telling others is that unless you hear it, see it in writing, and in front of you face to face, what you're thinking in your head and repeating like a cassette is a lie, right? So unless, I'm going to repeat it again because I seem to repeat this often, unless you heard it, unless you read it, that you are a certain way, please ignore it. Just purge it out of your mind. It's not fact. It's just an exaggeration that you're echoing again. And that's probably one of the more challenging, because we can give you all the tools, but you're overthinking it and you're redigesting it. And then how many of you have seen it where you had a bad incident happen on a Friday, fire drill, and you're still thinking about it during the weekend? Your personal life is suffering because you're indirectly venting to your loved ones or your friends and repeating it again, and you're not able to close the issue out. And then Monday comes, you're exhausted mentally after rehearsing that in your head, echoing the negativity, and now you're drained from everything else. So try to purge, give yourself 5 seconds, 3 strikes out, move on. Please try to move forward. You are amazing already. Repeat that in your head over and over. Instead of saying, repeat, I'm not good enough, repeat it 100 times, put a lipstick in the mirror, say, I'm beautiful, I'm amazing, I'm not alone. And if you do need help, please don't wait. You can ask, message people, have accountability buddies to help you out. So just those are some additional. It looks like Annie shared Glassdoor suggests a pay range, what to expect in the role experience. Use this info to negotiate. I think transparency is the key. And Jay, you called it out. We need to publicize this more. I don't know, Lori also said that, making sure salaries are public, then it would make people more accountable. Mm-hmm. So go ahead. And it looks like there's more on allies.
Yeah, so for allies, the shout out is we all have privilege, and stepping outside of your privilege to call out an unjust situation that is affecting someone else is using your privilege to empower. So sponsor, mentor, and support, and be an ally. Is the call to action for allies in closing the pay gap. And for organizations, we already talked about this, pay transparency, but also creating pipeline programs for women of color through employee resource groups, ERGs, and through mentorship matchmaking programs is advisable. And, we can talk more about this, and continue to talk about this, but unless we have some kind of structures in place to help us formulate policy and enforce it, I don't think, we can make a dent in this, right? So all these suggestions are really wonderful. Where did you get them from, Maybelline?
What, this feedback right here?
Yeah.
It was definitely part of research, and I can't take credit. It's a lot of it is Julien's work previously before I joined, but this is something that we definitely want to. And I know, Julien, do you want to speak through that and the source as well? I know it's a collective research that she's done for several years now, even before it. Let me see. Not yet.
Okay.
There she is.
So you're asking what do you need? Hold on here. Okay. Can you see me? Okay.
Yep.
Yes.
we see
So
you.
yeah, are we talking about the specific women of color in the workplace research, or are we talking about the work that I've been doing over the past?
I was just asking about, how to, what are the ways in which we can help close the wage gap? And so we had all these suggestions based on your research, apparently. So we were trying to see how that research came about. Is it based on your experience, or, you could point to some research studies that we could refer to?
So yeah, it's a compilation of my research and just talking to women in the workplace. So some of you may know, and then a lot of you may not know, that I led the program Lean and Women of Color over the past 5-6 years. And that what that program particularly was about was just exploring women of color's experience in the workplace and really trying to figure out, what does it mean for women of color to advocate for themselves at work, because we know that women of color, their experience is unique and intersectional. So over the past several years, we've been asking women of color, how did they get there? How did they get to the top? Women of color in the workplace also, and Lean Women of Color, in conjunction to that program, we also have a program called Conversations for Equal Pay. And so we've interviewed a number of women at the top of their industries and asked them, how did they get there? And what can companies do to close the wage gap? What can companies do to move their diversity, equity, and inclusion mission forward?
Yep.
Wonderful, wonderful. Always good to know the source so that we can use this when we, talk to other women, right? So this is a great share. Maybe we could make this into kind of like a PDF, Maybelline. It's just these steps here on how to help take steps to close the wage gap. And we can probably send it as a resource to everyone on today's call and everyone who registered.
Yep. That's definitely a great idea. And it looks like Lori also shared the Conversations for Equal Pay is a great podcast, also for reference, in addition to this, right? It's
Okay.
additional
Conversations for Equal Pay. Yeah, That's never heard of it. Definitely will look it up.
Yep. And looks like we have a question too. Rachel asks, how do you answer expected salary range on the intake web applications that don't let you skip or requires an actual amount when you don't want to pigeonhole yourself to a salary? So this is unfortunately a question has been asked. So how do you respond to that? For me, if I had to answer it, I would just make up a number, put the one I want. Right? If you can't skip it, I'll go high again. I'm not gonna go low. If they know your worth, as some people have mentioned, I'm gonna put the salary that I want for myself. What do you think, Jay?
What was the question again, Maybelline? Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, so the question is, how do you answer expected salary range in the intake web applications that don't let you skip or requires an actual amount when you don't want to pigeonhole yourself to a salary?
Yeah. Well, my experience in HR that tells me that you definitely should be very realistic in what you ask, because again, you don't want to come across as someone who is just pulling a number out of a hat. There are so many resources that you can refer to, like Glassdoor publishes, I think Annie mentioned this, Glassdoor publishes pay ranges based on geographic location, role, and experience. And you can definitely look that up and research, or actually just Google. Google produces so many results these days. Just Google for salary ranges for your particular role in that geographic area, or not in that geographic area, but in general, right? And get an idea, and then use that number. And I kind of get why Maybelline says use the higher end, because then it gives you more negotiating power.
Mhm.
Definitely, but don't be too high also is it's my personal opinion. And be realistic. That's what I would say. Be realistic, because that genuineness will come across through your application process, not just at that first stage, but as you go through the selection process, how genuine and how realistic you are will come across in that.
Right. And it looks like Dr. Cecilia also agrees. A little exaggeration in a positive direction goes a long way. The bottom line, be ready to meet expectations and get the job done. If there is something you don't know, be honest and say, I will find out. As a lifelong learner, we continue to grow when we're challenged. I definitely live up to that. But I know Jay has recommended be realistic, but realistically, our realistic perception is actually too low of a bar. And that's why I'm going to repeat this again. Ask high, not low, because culturally, if not our specific demographic, we usually put ourselves too low. We're not great at complimenting ourselves. We're not very good at bragging about our great work. And just think about it. Let's just pause for a few, right?
Sadia says she goes on Glassdoor to review and usually asks for a number that is on the higher end, but I always say open to negotiation.
There you go.
Okay.
Definitely open to negotiation.
Yeah.
So, well, I think we're almost at the end. So I want to make sure we are respectful of your time. So we only have a few minutes left. So I want to make sure that we review a few important topics, and that will be the next piece is the ceilings, right? So there's the glass ceiling. We talked about that earlier. It describes the situation that women often face in which they find it difficult or even impossible to climb the corporate ladder. Again, we talked about the not always applying to us. We said concrete ceiling for women of color. For Asian, they even call it bamboo ceiling. It was referenced South Korean burn leadership consultant Jane Yoon coined the term bamboo ceiling, which encompasses the challenges faced by high achieving Asian Americans. So there are more in here, which I'm not going to repeat because we already are pretty much in the last time. So what do you think? There's different types of different barriers. Do you feel there are limitations placed on women and women of color? So that's just an open question for the audience. No?
Hi.
Yeah. Hi. Dr. Cecilia. Yes.
Hi. Thank you for the encouragement. I just wanted to say that we actually have based on my research, first of all, thank you for this platform and meeting all of the wonderful ladies virtually, so to speak. I just wanted to say that the glass ceiling has actually been broken because we do have our first biracial Vice President Kamala Harris. And the new barrier that women actually face, and can you believe it, I have to say there's another barrier. We've already had the glass ceiling, but now we have what is known as the glass cliff. And that's GLASS, we know that, and not ceiling, but cliff. And the reason why they use glass cliff in my research is because women are actually forgotten about that they are risk takers. And when you are a risk taker, whatever your field is, once you've reached, let's say, the highest point in your career, whatever that is for you, what the bias is, how long is it going to take you to fall off of that position? Did you get there because of someone you knew? Did you get in that position because you were looked at as a pretty face, etc.? So make a long story short, we do have another barrier, and it's called glass cliff. And women today, I think it was pointed out by another viewer, that women are definitely qualified. They're actually overqualified. The question is, when you get in that position, are you, yeah. Yes, glass cliff.
Awesome,
Argue.
Dr. Brantley. I love this word, phrase that you've just enlightened us about. This is awesome. Glass cliff. Wow.
Yeah, that's in my research. I'm actually working with another organization to do another study, which is going to have the acronym YOW, referring to Year of Women. I think this is the year of women where, for example, a lot of your viewers are in STEM. My research is just basically kind of like what Miss Allen had said, talking to women, but the women I want to talk to are those that are in male dominated industries. Because to me, if you think about it, I have to be honest, that's where most of the high paying jobs are.
Yes.
And so the question is, for the year of the woman, 2021, how can we come up with some type of guideline and strategy that will be put in writing as a procedure how to make women in male dominated industries feel welcome? And when we say feel welcome, let's face it, we're talking about pay, we're talking about respect, everything that anybody would want, regardless of gender or not.
Yep.
So I just wanted to say thank you for letting me say what I said, and maybe I can connect with you guys later.
Oh,
With respect to my. Thank
Please
you.
connect. We'd love to, talk more with you.
Thank you so much. But remember, the higher the ceiling, all that means is we're going to do more.
Oh yeah, we are in overdrive. We just got.
Yes. We multitask, compartmentalize. Women do a lot. I don't know about their single mothers or whatever, but it's like being Wonder Woman. And the more strategies and skills and capabilities we have, we'll just put that magic hand in that bag and say, what do I have to pull out in order to show you that I belong? And you know what? We have those things to show them. So this is a platform to give us encouragement, and thank you.
Yes, perfect. Thank you. You're Wonder Woman right there. And we're
So are you.
Wonder Woman right there.
Yeah, you're right on it and right on cue. Action, right? What do you think a thought leader can do to help women of color overcome some of the hurdles we just discussed? So if you want to share a couple, and then we're going to close out the session. We're pretty much toward the end. So who wants to share?
Lee says, thank you all for creating this wonderful environment for those who have so much in common to share their stories. Yes, thank you, Lee, for being here. Chrissy says, thank you so much for sharing, Dr. Brantley. Your work sounds amazing and looking forward to checking it out. Yes, we all are. Annie says, thank you for the awareness, Dr. Cecilia. I wasn't even aware of the glass cliff existing till today. Yes, neither was I, Annie. So that's definitely a term I'm going to research and talk about more.
We definitely need a coalition here.
Yeah. Maria says wonder, and she spelt it all caps with periods in between. And Martha says, thank you, very insightful. Sadia says, thank you for this platform. I love part 2 of this call. It would be great to connect with this group through LinkedIn. Absolutely. I think we're all on LinkedIn. Just look us up and we'll be able to connect. And Martha, very insightful conversation. So yeah, this is awesome. When is part 2?
Oh, it's coming up. We'll definitely announce it. So make sure you follow us on the LinkedIn, Wonder Woman of Color. I mean, Wonder Woman. I'm already calling Wonder Woman. It's Women of Color in the Workplace. We have the YouTube. We also have the Facebook page, Instagram, you name it. So if you don't know, follow us everywhere. So we'll be announcing that very soon. So thank you again. And we'll wrap it up.
Yeah.
Julene, you want to end it out and close it out for us?
Thank you, everyone. This has been awesome. I've just enjoyed learning and sharing with everyone. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, everyone, for being here this evening. Just a few things that you can do to close the to overcome the concrete ceiling. Women of color, just speak up and speak out at work, regardless of your career level, your leadership is required. Whether you're the first, only, or few at work, your voice matters. You can locate someone in the same boat as you and adopt one another as allies. If you're in leadership, take someone under your wing. Or you can start an employee resource group or join one at work. And before saying yes to a new opportunity, see what type of DEI practices are already in place. Or if the company requires more work in this area, see if they would be willing to do any of the following. Start an internal matchmaking mentorship program, provide leadership or professional training, incorporate ERGs, or install a diversity, equity, and inclusion council. Or you can share your experiences at work by responding to the Women of Color in the Workplace study by visiting womenofcolorintheworkplace.com. And lastly, leaders in management. You can sponsor an ERG or become an ally at work. Let your employees know that you are committed to diversity and inclusion by establishing a budget for the ERG, inviting existing and new employees to participate, or sit in on meetings to show your support and commitment. Many companies provide sexual harassment training. So why not incorporate unconscious bias training, since social scientists state that everyone has biases and prejudices? Unconscious bias training does not eliminate bias alone, but can help identify those blind spots during job selection and policymaking. Or you could create a mentorship and sponsorship matchmaking program at work. Senior leaders benefit from establishing proteges, and new and early talent benefit from locating sponsors at work. Or you could show your commitment to any of these following actions by signing the Women of Color in the Workplace Pledge. Pledge to do more, which is located on our website. Thank you for joining us. You can follow our updates on LinkedIn or subscribe to our newsletter on our website, or you can join us tomorrow for our book discussion, The Truths We Hold, An American Journey by Kamala Harris. And you can save the date for March 24th, All Women Equal Pay Day discussion. I'm going to open the floor up for comments. We don't really have any time left, but Maybelline and I will stand by for a few minutes if you have any questions.
Thank you, ladies. This was wonderful. I appreciate you all.
This is Sadia. Thank you so much, guys, for creating this platform. I am part of an underrepresented minority group, so this has been wonderful. Thank you. I appreciate. I look forward to part 2 of this. So please,
Yes.
And I'm requesting another call.
To be continued. We got more.
Yes.
And join us tomorrow too on our book club. That's, I think, our first one. So if you want to join, even if you didn't finish the entire book, please join in. There's going to be
yes, would love to join. If I can get a link, I would love to join in, and would love to get connected with more ladies. Yes.
Awesome.
So,
Let me share that on the page. There we go. Here's the book club.
Great job, Wonder Woman.
Hey, Kim, you can hang out with us. She's my co-leader, kind of informal introduction to Julene here.
Hi, Kim. Very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
Glad you made it. Now you can have more homework, Kim.
I know you'll task me. I know how you are.
Just wanted to say take care, and thank you so very much, Miss Allen and Miss Plessy and Miss Polaski. Thank you so very much. Be well, be safe, and be fit.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Dr. Brantley. Very nice to meet you.
Thank you. God bless you. Bye-bye.
All right. So let me stop my share. And I'm going to start the recording.